Hello, everyone. I welcome you once again to part 2 of the discussion on Geetanjali Shree's novel, Tomb of Sand. And I am very happy that two of our friends have joined us for part 2. They had not joined us in the first session, Anita Mishra and Pragya Paramita. I welcome you, Anita and Pragya. I welcome you to the Malgudi group. And I'm sure our viewers would want to know a little bit about you. So I request both of you to tell us a bit about yourselves and how you feel being part of this group. Yes, Pragya.
Hello, Shatrupa. Hello, Anita. It's great to be here. I'm glad I am part of a reading group because it makes me do something which I usually try to put reading this book. I would not have taken it up normally on my own, but at least because I was a part of this group, because I was supposed to, it's like an assignment. And yeah, it was great. I wouldn't say that, yeah, it was without pain. Yeah, this book is very, very sensitive. There were parts where I giggled, and there were parts where I burst into tears. But it was great. It was a great experience. And I'm glad that I was part of this group and it made me do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Pragya, for such sweet words. Over to you, Anita.
Thank you, Shatrupa. And it was a lovely introduction that Pragya gave because she basically echoes my thoughts on the book as well. I am Anita Mishra. I am an assistant professor in English and I teach at Dhenkanal Mahila Mahavidyalaya. I was friends with both Pragya and Shatrupa since our PG days in Hyderabad University. And from then onwards, we kept in touch over a lot of topics, one of which was books. But we never thought of having a book club like this together before Shatrupa proposed the idea. And it is true that a book club gets ideas together in a very organic manner, something that we don't really get to witness when we are the teachers in a classroom. So instead of being the teacher, now we are all equals. And instead of being the only one giving a dissertation on a topic, it is all of us giving our inputs, our thoughts about something that we find a connection with. So therefore, I'm very grateful to the Malgudi group and Shatrupa for coming together and making me read something that, like Pragya said, I would not have gone into as a natural manner because I'm not very much into Indian writing in English out of my free will. But when I'm made to read them, I realize that we have a long past of beautiful writings that we basically deprive ourselves of in the general run of mill type of life that we lead. So thank you, Shatarupa, and I hope that we will have a good discussion today.
Thank you, Anita. I hope that too. And I must take some time to tell our viewers that we could not record the second part of this discussion on 22nd as promised because of illnesses running in our group. And though we don't still feel comfortable, there are traces of illnesses still with us. But this is the charm of a book club where we transcend those, those illnesses, those points of discomfort, because we want to get together and have this conversation. Yes, it was really nice coming together after those university days when we, used to study for classes. This is something different, and therefore a lot of memories are also with us. And I must tell our viewers that two of our members, Arpita, who is, one of the two pillars of this group, I would say, because she was the one who supported me, and together we thought that we could do this. She is not well, and therefore she could not join us today. And Bhavya also is traveling, because of which she's not here today. So we miss both of them. And I wish Arpita gets well soon and joins us for the third session. So without delay, we would now ask Pragya and Anita, because it's the first time we are listening to them. I would ask them to talk, whatever the book inspired in them, whatever feelings, whatever thoughts the book inspired in them, especially part two, which interestingly begins with the image of a door. And I feel that the symbol of door runs throughout the narrative of the book. A special door, a door which is unique to the people walking in and out, a door which has a life, a door which participates in the narratives that are woven day in and day out, a door that takes part in the drama, a door that has a lot to say, and a door that has a lot to hide as well. So part two begins with that kind of a door to Beta's Bade's door. As we talked about the character of Bade in the first session, that transition where a kind of interaction happens between Beti trying to walk in and Bahu trying to walk out, and the friction or the unsaid things between Beti and Bahu and the figure of the door. So the first part ends and the second part begins with those thoughts. And I would ask Pragyan to take it from here and talk to us a little bit about the book. Yes, Pragyan.
It's interesting that you should mention Dor Shatrupa, because that is what struck me first when I read the novel. It is a beautiful novel. Every part of it is beautiful. But yeah, I got a pause. While I was reading, I paused at when doors were mentioned, because you see, somehow till now, while reading, I have been used to thinking of thresholds, borders, boundaries horizontally. But when I read about doors and walls in part one, for the first time, the idea of that vertical space struck me. Instead of it just being a limit in an area, it became a limit in a space, a sort of cage which held people back and left people outside. And that is how Bade's house differs from Beti's house, because in Bade there were so many comings and goings. Yes, it belonged to certain family members, but Bade was also a community supporter. So many people came and went. They took the help of Bade, and in order to pay him back, they helped out at home. So it was mostly a community house. As opposed to that, Beti lived a relatively secluded life, a comparatively secluded life. Her life was completely transformed when her mother came in. To all intents and purposes, she lives quite near her mother's house, her brother's house, but she's used to calling her space her own. And suddenly, with the coming of the mother, with the mother becoming a part of the household, suddenly it's although the mother is the protagonist, Beti's discomfort, her sense of disorientation is brought to fore. Suddenly her space is no longer her own. She feels so discomfited. The bells, the comings, the goings, the chitter chatter of the house, when she hears the ringing sound, she's unable to figure out, is it the telephone bell, is it the bell of the intercom, is it some door which is being opened, who is here? And she stumbles and she falls. And that kind of makes us think about how space, we kind of orient space along according to our lifestyle, according to our wishes, and suddenly that is not there anymore. Right, visitors come to Ma because Ma wants to have a balcony garden, so they have a gardener, they have a cook who would prepare meals for specific times for Ma. And because of all these visitors, suddenly Beti is left in the lurch. She does not know her own home anymore. And that discomfort is not shared by Ma. Initially, Betty has a slight sense of superiority, that, oh no, my poor mother, even though there was every comfort in my brother's place, still nobody really cared for her. I will give that care to her and I will nurse her back to health. I will become her mother. That was her attitude. But suddenly she was the one fumbling. The guests were more at ease with Ma than with Betty. Betty just didn't know what to do with herself, and she resented everybody else, because they made her feel so, such an alien, like such an alien in her own house. She did not feel comfortable with her boyfriend KK. She could not talk freely with Sid, and also with Rosie Masi. When Rosie Masi came, it was not welcomed by Betty. She kind of, earlier she had been okay with Rosie Mossy, but suddenly she felt as if Rosie Mossy was an intruder. She felt as if she was taking Ma in a direction which became unfamiliar with her. But Ma was very familiar with the entire household. And the second part is called Sunshine. And Sunshine is mother's signature card. It becomes so at one with Ma. It's like Betty is still human, but the mother has transcended the boundaries of human. She's become ethereal. She's become part of the sunshine, part of all the living things that slowly grow and develop in that house. I especially love the bit where the tiny saplings, the tiny plants, are compared with Ram the toddler, Sri Ram the toddler. Tumaka Chalataram Chandra, Betty says. There is a sort of tenderness towards things that one has planted, one is, nurturing, tending to, and they are growing. And with them, Ma is recovering her strength. She's recuperating. It's a household that heals Ma. Somehow it is unable to soothe Betty. Betty is unable to rest. She's always cautious in case she might be wanted to help support Ma. But for Ma, slowly she's regaining her strength, and slowly she's becoming more and more independent of Betty. And Rosie Mossy helps her in this process of recovery. She helps her recycle things, make gifts, toys, and knickknacks, and various contraptions for her, for all the neighbors. She designs, less cumbersome clothes for Ma, and they have a lot of fun. They explore together. They go to the tomb nearby, and they explore the lake nearby. It's a lovely piece, and somehow it, goes to a point where, again, like in the previous part, there is a search for Ma in the end. And here also, there's a search for Rosie Mossy, who suddenly disappears, and there's a search for Rosie Mossy in the end. Everybody comes together looking for her. They do not find her, and we are left to speculate that she has met a sad end, right? Something untoward has happened to her. In all this seeking and growing, Ma slowly gains her voice. The Ma that was not there in part one, Ma's back. There, now she's actually back. She's regained her strength. She's regained her willpower. She's trying to find, what her likes and dislikes are. She's trying to assert herself. That is what I admired the most about this novel. It's about bringing a person back to life, a resurrection of sorts. That's what I thought about the novel. Thank you. Yeah, something
Thank
else that
you.
I forgot. Sorry,
Yes, yes,
Shatra.
please continue. Continue, Pragya.
Yeah, sorry. In the first part, there was almost a litany of dishes which were prepared for Bade's, retirement party. Here also, there's a list of different saris which are described by Bade when he tries to spy on his mother. Somehow he does not like this new avatar of hers. and he wants to see his old ma in clothes that he's used to, and he's fond of decking her up like a goddess in different fabrics brought from different parts of India, and in giving it to her. And for him, the fact that his mother cherishes those saris, that his wife kind of is jealous of his mother because of his gifts, that kind of brings it all to him together. It's like India is encompassed in the figure of his mother and his wife. For him, that is his world, that is his home, that is his comfort and security. And that is a bit that portion of writing where the crows kind of resent him for intruding upon their space, and they are almost about to attack him when a senior lady crow, she asks him not to attack it. That felt very real, about how if we give it some time, every dispute can be solved, when like E.M. Foster says, only connect. That's there. It's like a sort of mending, a healing. All breaches, all disputes can be taken care of. Friendship can bloom again if only one deals with everything with a little bit of patience and understanding and empathy and love. That was what I loved about the novel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pragya. I must at this point tell you that I have always admired the way you talk about stories, especially stories that we find in a novel, not a short story, but in a novel, because in a novel we see so many shades of development that happens over the length of the whole piece of writing. And whenever I listen to you talking about a narrative, I feel that a narrative is in safe hands. And I feel that, what you say about the narrative, how you talk about a story, also gives us, something apart from the narrative where we can, sit and think and relate with things. So, you have such a sweet way of talking about stories, I must say. And the way you talked about spaces, the way you talked about these interactions. There's a line in the beginning of the second part that things that happen in semi-consciousness are actually unvarnished reality. And I feel that the way you talk about stories, it takes us back to those moments of semi-conscious responses to the novel that we are reading. And we feel that those thoughts are so real that we cannot find that kind of a reality when, let's say, we write a research paper on a novel or we deal with the novel in a classroom. So thank you, Pragya, for that special, session. Your observations were really very beautiful. And now I must request Anita to put forth her thoughts.
Thank you, Shatrupa. And like you said, it was such a lovely experience to listen to Pragya and her unique take on the text, because Pragya really brings a beautiful flavor to whatever she deals with. Now, I would like to have a segue into my paper. Paper? This is just a discussion, sorry. But I would like to have an entry point from what she mentioned, the saris that Bade brought for his mother and his obsession with getting her back into the saris. He feels like when Beti puts her in the long gowns that she is wearing, she has taken away something from his childhood, something that was very essential to him. Because if you notice, when he is remembering Ma in all the saris, he is going back to a time when Beti never existed. He's going back to a childhood where he was the apple of her eyes. When he talks about the gifts that he gave her, he is still in control of his mother and his world. The fact that he wants to always keep her in saris, but Ma feels unable to carry on in saris any longer. They have become too long for her. She's unable to tuck them in properly, and therefore she has to reinvent herself not only through clothes but through her entire lifestyle, through her entire mindset. That is basically what part 2 of the book is about. I remember reading a bit of the Hindi, original Hindi, a line by a reviewer, and I really felt touched by it. If you remember, there was a part in the first section, Ma's back, where um, she is refusing to leave her bed, and that line was, "Now I will not rise," and it goes on and it ends at, "Now I will rise anew." So the Hindi portion was very beautiful in my opinion. अब तो मैं नहीं उठूंगी, अब तो मैं नहीं उठूंगी, अब तो मैं नहीं उठूंगी, अब तो मैं नहीं ही उठूंगी. So the translator has done a very faithful job in bringing this word play in the English translation as well. When no turns into new. And this reinvention of self is basically what part 2 is about. When you know a person all your life, you continue to put them in that one identity. Bade also wants his mother to be the same woman who has been his caretaker, who has loved him, cherished him, and who has received his gifts without any complaints, without any other requirements all her life. When Betty brings her into her household, she thinks, I will give her a new lease of life. What neither of them contemplated was that when Ma enters a new world, she will also be recreated. Like a phoenix, Ma rises from the ashes of her old life and reinvents her like a newborn baby. Now, one of the first feelings that I got when I was reading Sunshine was a jolt because I am the mother of a 9-year-old child. And when the description starts of Ma being cared for by Betty, when we see how Betty is giving up all her comfort and only thinks about taking care of Ma, when Ma is reveling in her new body, we see all the stages of a new mother. We see how when a child is born, a woman's entire identity becomes encompassed in that new life. How protective she becomes of that child. Please excuse me a second. I have a sore throat and it acts up at weird moments. If you see the mother's reaction to coming to Betty's world, everything is new and fresh in her eyes. And there is a particular focus on shapes and colors, something which, if you know child psychology, you will realize is the first thing that a child perceives when they look at the world with their new eyes. So, just like a newborn baby, she is realizing textures, she's looking at shapes, she's looking at colors, she is checking out what is different from the world I inhabited earlier and in this new world. Just like a baby does when it goes out of the womb of its mother and enters a new world. The first thing that she does on coming to Betty's house is settle in and sleep peacefully. Betty is taken aback, and we see the morphing of Betty from a daughter into a mother when she has these motherly feelings in her heart towards her own mother, and she thinks that poor woman has not been taken care of properly. I will take care of her. And you see the image of Ma taking over the bed and Betty being relegated to one corner of the bed. You see Betty always being wary about how to take care that my mother is not crushed under my weight. I have gone through all those emotions when my child was born. Therefore, every time I read those parts, I felt a jolt. The jolt of recognition, of deja vu, because Geetanjali Shree has beautifully brought out that feeling of a mother who is slowly trying to make the world a safe place for her child. But while ensuring the safety and the security and the happiness of her child, the mother loses her own self. And that is evident when we see Betty becoming frustrated by her lack of control over her ambience. She cannot control the number of people coming into her house. She cannot control the behavior of these people, even though everyone is very optimistic, very positive, very supportive. She has never wanted that support. She was an independent woman. Just like a woman before she becomes a mother, she is a confident person who knows her own abilities, what her own powers, um, her own place in this world. Normally, a woman knows what she can do and she can't do, and she is quite comfortable with her position in her society. But when a child comes, everything loses itself and she only turns into a mother. She no longer is the lover of her husband, which we see in Betty's case, that she pushes KK away even when it is not required. Her mother accepts KK, and her mother is not there occasionally, but she has no desire for her lover anymore. Every time she is focused on what is Ma doing, what will Ma think, what can I do to make her comfortable. She is losing her connection with her lover. She is losing her connection with her own household. And Betty turns into a very exemplary case of postpartum depression. You must know that several mothers face this kind of a disorientation, a separation from their own identities, and they fail to be happy in their motherhood. These women have a lot of difficulty in adjusting to the new situation, which is that of caring for a new life. And while the child is flourishing, the mother feels like she's going into a decline. Similarly, we see that Ma is getting a new life. When she's feeling her bodily aches and pains, even then she is having fun, she is having freedom, and she is thriving and rediscovering her body. Just like a child goes through different stages. We know in child psychology, there are different stages of a child's development. Similarly, she is exulting in her own body. Like a small girl goes through puberty, she is also discovering different aspects of her body and feeling like this is a new me. As Pragya said about the plants, she is creating life while getting life into her own body. The sunlight becomes an embodiment of Ma herself. She is no longer human, like Pragya mentioned. She has turned into an embodiment of the sunlight that is reflected everywhere. But the more sunlight Ma turns into, the more darkness comes into Beti's life. This image of the bed is very poignant because every young mother knows how slowly you go and tuck yourself into the corner so as to not crush your child in the middle, and you are hanging on the edge of the bed just holding on every time the child moves. When the mother is getting up to go to the bathroom, the daughter cannot sleep. The daughter is sleepless. Every mother knows this feeling of sleeplessness, this feeling of always being on alert. And I can feel the pain of Betty when she is saying that I don't know who I am anymore. It is a it is an exemplary case of postpartum depression that we see reflected ironically in a daughter regarding her mother, because this is a relationship they are newly discovering. Even though Betty has always been with Ma throughout her childhood and young days, now they are rediscovering their relationship, and they cannot find their position in each other's lives properly. Ma is very settled. Wherever she goes, she's spreading the sunshine that this chapter is named after. And she is actually reinventing the lives of people around her. The community is coming alive with the presence of Ma. Like sunlight gives new life to the things that are growing in nature. Similarly, Ma brings new life to the people in the society. Not only is she giving jobs to people like the gardener, people like the maid who never had to come to Beti's house earlier, but now they have gotten jobs. But she is also giving happiness to the people around her. People are learning to interact more. People are learning to be aware of each other and of their surroundings. And she turns into happiness. Earlier, she was limited to her family. And when she was limited to her family, she might have been the core of the family. when she was the matriarch before her daughter-in-law took a more powerful role in the household. But she was not responsible for the joys and thoughts of her family members. Now somehow she is the epicenter of the joy spilling over into the society. With Rosie Bua, Ma starts reinventing society by creating new things from old broken trash. This is a beautiful symbol of how they are recreating society life in a city where people are usually separated from each other emotionally and physically. She's bringing them all together when they're contributing something and when they're taking something back. It again brings us back to the Holy Trinity of creation, preservation, and destruction. Something which was already being destroyed is suddenly preserved and recreated. So we see the cycle of life which has started anew because of the presence of Ma in the society. The very name Sunshine makes the reader aware that Ma's back, a portion which talked about her escape from the world, is going to take a very sharp turn into something positive because sunlight has always been associated with positivity. And we see the reflection of this positivity for a large part of this text. We see how people consider her to be important in their world, whether it is Bade, who is holding on to an idealized image of his mother in her younger days when she was entirely his, not only his responsibility, but also his to cherish, his to love. He is holding on to that ideal. Betty is trying to hold on to her own identity in a world which is escaping her hands. But she continues to be proud of the changes she has brought about in Ma, which she believes Bade could not do. She is very proud of the fact that I gave Ma an opportunity which my brother could not give her. Similarly, we see that KK is very comfortable with her. Rosie Bua, a person who many people consider to be an outsider in civilized society. Such a woman is given complete acceptance by Ma, and because of her acceptance, Rosie Bua continues to be accepted by everyone in the society. It is interesting that when Ma gives her a stamp of approval, then the society people also approve of her. Those who don't approve of her cannot really openly disapprove because they want the approval of Ma. So Ma becomes the power equation who changes everyone's perception of the situation. This new organic role of Ma as the heart of the society around her is a very big contrast to her position in the family in the first part of the novel. Now, after all of this, I would like to conclude with her crass love of humor, which is based around her bodily requirements. I found it very interesting that this novel was written a couple of years, or rather, it was published. It must have started ages ago, of course. It was published a couple of years after the super hit Hindi movie called Piku. If you remember Piku was a film where there is an octogenarian father played by Amitabh Bachchan. Bhaskar was his name. And Bhaskar has a young daughter who is fed up trying to take care of him. And his continuous concentration is on his bodily functions, particularly his constipation. We find that reflected in Ma as well. And something that you might find difficult in abstract, why is the writer saying that she was so focused on this thing, becomes easier to understand if you realize that a few years ago it was also normalized in a movie like Piku with a veteran actor like Amitabh Bachchan that these things are a part of life. You cannot have elegance, you cannot have beauty when it refers to something that is crude but essential. Just like our bodily functions are necessary, similarly, laughter does not always have to be highbrow. Happiness does not always have to come from something that is ethereal on a superior plane. It is there in life all around us, in the failures, in the achievements. When our bodies fail us, that is also a matter of discussion, and you can take pleasure even from saying how far you have suffered. Ma takes pleasure in her pain, and that is where she turns the power equation of understanding around. Normally, we understand that when there is pain, there is some kind of um, lack of power in us. We are inferior because we are feeling pain, because we are losing out. Ma changes this and she makes it evident that even though you don't feel powerful, you don't feel in control of your situation, still then you can laugh about it and take the power back in your hands. Before I conclude, because I was not there in the first part of the discussion, I would just like to talk a little bit about the names of the characters. They are generic, all of them. None of them have any names assigned to them. There is Ma, there is Beti, the elder son is Bade, and then there is Bahu. But we have a son who lives abroad, who is overseas son, and we have one child who has been named, one son. The name is interesting because he is always called Sid. Sid is a modern name. Sid is a happy name. But what is the full form? The full form is Siddharth. And if you remember, there is this old statue of Gautam Buddha in their house, which is like the heart of the storyline. The Buddha statue, which is coveted by people, the Buddha statue, which needs to be preserved from other people who may have different ideas, and so on and so forth. What was the name of Gautam Buddha before he became enlightened? It was Siddharth. Siddharth was a prince who was full of the joy of living, who had life ahead of him, who was the hope of his family, who was the prince of a beautiful kingdom. So it is very interesting that there is one character who is full of the joy of life, who is the most normal, the sweetest character of them all. You can say the most uncomplicated person, and he is named Siddharth. So the connection between the lack of names everywhere else and this one name which is connected with Gautam Buddha before enlightenment is very interesting, because he reflects the fact that this is just a setting, things are going to change in the future, and he's a reflection of that change by his very name and his presence. So that's all that I would like to talk about. Yes. So thank you so much for letting me have my time and having your patience with me. Thank you, Shatrupa.
Thank you so much, Anita. Definitely, listening to you took me towards various directions. You talked about how a mother copes up with the changes in her body when a child is born. And you talked about how Ma wanted to turn her back towards everyone else. And I feel perhaps there is a connection between these two. One is so used to occupying the edge of one's bed and leaving room for her children, that even in this state of mm, this semi-consciousness, or when she is really not herself anymore, that the trace of that urge persists. So probably Ma moving towards the wall is a kind of thing that has stayed with her. She always wants to leave room for her children on the bed. So probably it is nothing natural, I mean unnatural for her, though it seems so to her children who want her back in their lives. So it was really interesting, and I was thinking that there is this concept of the story taking its own course, or the story developing in its own way throughout the narrative of the novel, that a story actually lives in those spaces which it leaves blank. Like everything has been defined, but there would be one unexplained window, and it would take the story somewhere else, and perhaps we would connect with each other as readers, and with the way the story is progressing through that particular window which has been left open. So I was actually intrigued by the way this work is self-reflexive. Continuously it draws attention to the fact that it is telling a story, and continuously it makes a comment that the story may change at any point of time, and the story is open to take its own path. And this was really something touching when you mentioned that, being a mother, you could actually understand all those things that were part of the narrative. Even I have lost a grandmother a year back, and I can tell you that when I was reading about, Ma turning her back on her family, I could, sense when my grandmother was bedridden, and when we were waiting on her, and we wanted her to talk to us and to come back to us, but she didn't. Those were her last days. But whatever description was there about Ma becoming smaller and smaller, and Ma becoming something else rather than a human within the quilt. Okay, so all those things I could relate to, because I had seen all those things happening with my grandmother before she passed away. So, why we read books, why we, come and talk about books, because we also want to say that, yes, I have actually experienced this. I can vouch for this. Or these words do not feel strange for me because I have lived in those words. So the idea of this book club was just that, living in a book together, because as the book, the writing of Geetanjali Shree tells us time and again, that this story has room for all, and it has doors, it has windows, it has walls, and all those spots or spaces which are there for us to occupy. I think that is what makes writing like this so relatable and so rich, because all of us can actually relive some moment of our life through a writing like Geetanjali Shree's, especially when you talk about Ma, perceiving the world through just two colors at a point, blue and green, blue standing for the sky and green standing for the natural space around us. So if just the world can be defined by these two colors, blue and green, so all that we go through, all that we experience, all that we perceive, there is a special way of talking about it. And this whole poetic novel, this philosophical novel, this novel which actually talks of that state of samadhi or meditation, it shows us how we move towards that meditative stage through language itself. And I feel that the language is so beautiful, and the language is it is so vivid that we can actually see those things happening around us. And I feel that I have just walked in through a door which is there in the novel. So thank you, Anita. It was really great listening to you. And, when you were talking about the novel, it felt as if, you have actually added something to the narrative. You have written down some lines of your own, and you have every right to, because as we know, a work is never just the writers. It is always the readers who bring so many things to a book, that a discussion on such a work would be endless. So I know our viewers must have also formed so many observations of their own just by listening to us, because I felt excited. I shared your excitement the way you were speaking, and of course Pragya's beautiful observations. So if you want to say anything else as a concluding remark, please do so, any of you. Otherwise, we will wind up this session. Yes.
Nothing comes to mind at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, fine. We have already, talked so much about it that we still, need some time to engage with the book in, in a more, a realistic way, or in a more, uh, with more feeling. We need that space. We need that silence. So I'm ready to recede into that silence once again before we come back for a discussion on the third part of the book, and we will meet again on Tuesday the 29th. Till then, I wish that our viewers think about what we just said or talked about, and I hope some of them are also planning to read this book, because that is our aim. Thank you so much, Anita and Pragya. Good night, and see you again for part 3. Thank you so much.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night. Thanks.
Oh my God. Okay.